From the very beginning, Lacey Chabert's name carried a special meaning in the world of Hallmark movies. She was not just another actress appearing on the screen. She was the face people trusted when they wanted comfort, romance, and emotions that felt pure. Whenever her name appeared in the credits, the audience already expected warmth, laughter, and tears at the right moments. Her journey in Hallmark films was not just about acting, it was about creating a connection that made viewers feel like her stories belonged to them. At first, no one imagined she would become such an important part of Hallmark's identity. But as more and more movies came out, it was clear that Lacey was not just playing characters. She was shaping how people saw love, family, and hope. Her presence was like a promise that no matter how simple the story looked, there would always be something meaningful inside. The power of her acting was not in big dramatic scenes, but in small, quiet moments where her eyes, her smile, or even her silence said more than words could. That was why audiences kept coming back. Her best work stood at the very top, like a bright light in her career. It was the kind of movie that people did not just watch once, they returned to it every season, every holiday, every time they wanted to feel close to something real. In this film, she carried the story with so much care that even the most ordinary scene felt magical. A simple walk in the snow became unforgettable. A short exchange of dialogue turned into something fans still remember years later. That was the magic of Lacey. She made ordinary stories extraordinary. But what made this role stand out even more was the way she touched emotions without forcing them. Viewers cried because the character's pain felt real. They smiled because her happiness looked natural. They believed in her love story not because of the script, but because of her. This performance became the high point, the one that would always be remembered as her best. And when fans talk about her career, this is the film they mention first. It was the perfect example of what Lacey could do when the story and her talent worked together. The emotional weight of that movie carried beyond the screen. Families gathered around their televisions during the holiday season, watching her as if she was part of their own celebrations. Couples found inspiration in her love story, and many admitted they wished their own romance could feel the same. For many, Lacey became not just an actress, but a symbol of love that could survive challenges, misunderstandings, and distance. This connection between her and the audience was something rare, and it gave her career a strong foundation. Yet, what makes this story even more powerful is not just her success, but the feeling of suspense that comes with it. If this was her best, then what followed? Could every film reach the same level? Or would some fall short of what fans had grown to expect? This question created excitement, curiosity, and even doubt. Every time a new Hallmark movie with her name was released, audiences wondered if it would live up to her greatest role or not. And this suspense made her journey even more fascinating. Her best movie was not just a success, it was the beginning of a larger story. A story filled with ups and downs, victories and disappointments, moments of brilliance and moments of struggle. But that is exactly what made it worth watching. Because in life, just like in films, nothing stays perfect forever. The beauty lies in watching the rise and the fall, the bright and the dark, the best and the worst. Lacey's story in Hallmark was never about perfection. It was about effort, emotion, and dedication. And while her best performance will always be remembered as a masterpiece, it also opened the door to everything that came after: the good, the bad, and the unforgettable. The journey starts with the highest point, the film that defined her charm, and slowly moves forward to show that even the brightest stars can face shadows. And so, as we step into this ranking, from best to worst, one thing is clear: Lacey Chabert's Hallmark movies are not just entertainment. They are a mirror of her growth, her passion, and the delicate balance between success and failure. The first step in this journey shines the brightest, but the road ahead is filled with twists and surprises. The audience is left with one thought burning in their minds: if this is the best, then what could possibly be the worst? After her best movie created such a strong bond with the audience, Lacey Chabert's journey did not stop there. In fact, it was just the beginning of something much bigger. Fans were waiting to see what she would do next, and every new Hallmark release with her name carried a kind of excitement. People sat down with hope, wondering if the next film would touch their hearts the same way. And in the very next step, Lacey gave them something powerful, something that proved she was not just a one-time success. This second movie in her journey may not have been the very best, but it carried a special weight. It showed a different side of her talent. In this film, her character was not just smiling and falling in love easily. Instead, she was carrying pain, doubt, and the fear of losing something important. This gave her role depth that fans had not seen before. Lacey was no longer just the charming face of Hallmark, she was becoming a storyteller who could bring complicated emotions to life. What made this movie stand out was not its perfect plot, but the way Lacey carried the weak parts with her own strength. The story had some predictable moments, yet whenever she appeared on screen, it felt fresh again. Her eyes carried the sadness of someone who had lost hope, but at the same time, her voice carried the strength of someone who refused to give up. This balance created a character that people remembered long after the credits rolled. Audiences connected deeply because the film reminded them of their own struggles. Many viewers saw themselves in her character's battles, in her mistakes, and in her journey toward healing. They cried with her, they smiled when she smiled, and they hoped for her happy ending as if it was their own. That was the gift Lacey gave in this performance. She turned a simple Hallmark story into something personal for each viewer. What made it even more emotional was how she showed vulnerability. There were scenes where she seemed so fragile that people wanted to reach through the screen and comfort her. And yet, a few moments later, she stood tall and strong, teaching the audience that pain does not mean weakness. That message made the movie unforgettable, even if the plot was not the strongest one Hallmark had ever written. The suspense for the viewers did not come only from the story inside the film, but also from the bigger picture of her career. After such a powerful start, people wondered, could she keep this level of performance in every film? Would she always find a way to turn simple scripts into meaningful stories? Or would there come a time when even her charm could not save a weak movie? These questions stayed in the minds of her fans, making them curious about every new project. This second movie also built her reputation as an actress who could carry Hallmark's brand on her shoulders. Without her, many films would have felt flat, but with her, even average writing turned into emotional journeys. She gave Hallmark a kind of trust that few actors could create. Audiences didn't just tune in for the story, they tuned in for her. That loyalty made her films successful, and it gave her the power to shape how people thought of Hallmark itself. But behind this success was also a hidden danger. When an actress becomes so strongly linked with one type of story, the risk is that people start expecting perfection every time. And perfection is impossible to repeat again and again. The audience did not realize it at first, but slowly they would begin to notice patterns. For now, though, in this second movie, they were still full of love and praise, carried by the emotions she gave them. The film ended on a hopeful note, just like many Hallmark classics, but it was her journey in the role that left the deepest mark. It showed that Lacey Chabert was more than just a beautiful smile and a soft romantic lead. She was an actress capable of showing raw emotion, of holding pain in her eyes while still offering warmth in her heart. That was why people kept talking about this movie, even when other Hallmark films faded away from memory. As the credits rolled, one truth became clear: Lacey's strength was not only in her best performances, but also in the way she made even ordinary films feel extraordinary. She had proven once again that her presence alone could transform a simple holiday romance into something worth remembering. And yet, hidden beneath the praise was a silent question: how long could she carry the weight of Hallmark's world on her shoulders before cracks began to show? By the time her next set of movies arrived, Lacey Chabert had already become a name that audiences trusted without question. Families would sit down together whenever her films were announced, and fans spoke of her as if she was part of their own circle of friends. But with so many projects coming one after another, the journey began to change. The glow of her very best films was still there, but now shadows were starting to appear. This stage of her career was different. The movies were still filled with romance, warm moments, and gentle lessons about love and family. Yet, something felt familiar, too familiar. The storylines began to follow patterns. The settings looked alike, the characters often faced the same kind of challenges, and the endings became predictable. For some, this was comforting. They knew exactly what to expect when they watched a Hallmark movie with Lacey. But for others, It was the beginning of disappointment. What saved these films, again and again, was Lacey herself. Even when the script offered little surprise, her performance gave life to the story. She had a way of bringing sincerity into every line, making the audience believe that her character was truly in love, truly broken, or truly hopeful. Without her, the films might have felt empty. With her, they carried emotion, even if only for a short while. In one of these middle-ranking movies, her character was someone chasing a dream that seemed impossible. The plot was simple, and many viewers guessed the ending within the first 10 minutes. But Lacey carried the role with so much heart that people still stayed until the very last scene. They wanted to see her journey, even if they already knew where it would end. Her charm kept the suspense alive, not in the story itself, but in how she would deliver each moment. Still, not everyone was satisfied. Critics and even some longtime fans began to whisper the same thought: have we seen this before? The spark of freshness that defined her best work was slowly fading, replaced by repetition. This was not Lacey's fault, but the result of Hallmark depending too heavily on the same formula. Yet, the audience's loyalty to her was so strong that many continued watching, even when the films lacked originality. There were also moments of brilliance hidden inside these predictable stories. A single emotional scene, a heartfelt speech, or a quiet glance could suddenly lift the entire movie. Lacey had the power to turn a weak script into something memorable, even if only for a few seconds. It was this ability that kept her films alive during this stage, even as the overall quality started to slide. But the danger was clear. The more movies she did with similar plots, the harder it became to surprise the audience. Suspense in her career shifted from wondering what would happen in the film to wondering whether she could keep her magic alive despite the repetition. Fans were no longer asking only about the characters she played. They were asking, quietly but seriously, can Lacey continue to shine if the stories keep repeating? This stage of her journey was a turning point. She was still admired, still beloved, but cracks had begun to show. The very thing that made her special, her ability to bring warmth and emotion, was now being used again and again in the same way. It was like watching a beautiful song played too many times. The melody was still lovely, but it no longer felt new. And yet, audiences kept coming back. Why? Because even when the story was weak, there was something irresistible about watching her. She made viewers feel safe, she reminded them of simpler joys, and she offered comfort in a world that often felt uncertain. For many fans, it did not matter that the films were becoming predictable. What mattered was that Lacey was there, smiling, loving, and teaching small lessons about life. But the truth could not be ignored. The gap between her very best work and these mid-level films was becoming more obvious. The ranking was slowly moving down, and the journey toward her weakest movies had begun. For now, she was still strong enough to hold the audience's attention. But in the distance, a question loomed like a shadow: what would happen when even her performance could no longer save the story? As the years went by, Lacey Chabert continued to appear in one Hallmark movie after another. She had become a familiar face, someone audiences trusted. But with so many roles, cracks began to show more clearly. The magic that once made every film shine was no longer enough to hide weak storytelling. The repetition that once felt comforting now started to feel heavy. Fans who once praised every movie began to notice the difference, and disappointment slowly crept in. One particular film during this period promised much but delivered little. The trailers built excitement, suggesting a romantic story filled with warmth and surprise. People expected something special, maybe even a return to the brilliance of her earlier work. But when the movie finally aired, the reaction was not what anyone hoped for. The story felt rushed, the dialogue sounded forced, and the chemistry between characters seemed flat. Lacey still gave her best. She smiled with her usual warmth, she cried with sincerity, and she tried to carry the story on her shoulders. But even her strongest effort could not hide the fact that the movie lacked heart. Viewers could see she was trying, but they could also see the script was weak. Instead of being carried away into a world of love and magic, many fans were pulled out of the story, left wondering how such a talented actress ended up in something so ordinary. For the first time, some audiences felt frustration. It was not anger at Lacey, but at the wasted potential. They knew she was capable of so much more, yet she was trapped in a film that gave her little room to shine. The disappointment was heavy, because when people care deeply for an actor, they expect every project to honor that talent. Watching her struggle in a weak movie was painful, almost like watching a friend take the wrong path. This was a turning point in her journey. It showed that even the most beloved star could not always save a failing story. The audience realized that the power of Hallmark movies did not rest only on Lacey's shoulders. Without strong writing, without fresh ideas, even she could stumble. And that stumble created suspense. If this movie had failed, what would happen in the next one? Could she rise again, or was this the start of a decline? What made this stage even more emotional was the contrast. Fans remembered her very best work, the films that had touched their hearts. Comparing those memories to these weaker movies was painful. The fall from greatness to mediocrity was not easy to watch. Yet, strangely, people kept tuning in. Some hoped the next film would bring back her magic. Others watched out of loyalty, unwilling to give up on someone who had given them so much joy in the past. There were still moments, small and fleeting, where Lacey's talent broke through. A single glance, a soft smile, or a heartfelt line reminded everyone why they loved her in the first place. These moments proved that her gift was still there, hidden beneath scripts that did not deserve her. But the overall weight of the movies was clear, they were not at the level her fans had grown to expect. This stage of her career was marked by disappointment, but also by suspense. Each new movie became a question mark. Would it be another letdown, or would it surprise everyone with something better? The uncertainty kept viewers curious, even when they felt let down. And that curiosity made her journey as fascinating as ever. In the world of entertainment, not every film can be a masterpiece. Even the greatest stars face projects that do not work. What mattered for Lacey was not that she stumbled, but how she continued to give her best, no matter the circumstances. She did not give up on her audience, even when the material around her seemed weak. That resilience, that determination to keep giving, became part of her story. But the truth could not be hidden. The gap between her best and her worst was now wide, and the audience could feel it. The fall from the heights of brilliance to the dullness of predictability was clear. And as her journey moved forward, one question stood larger than ever. If this was not her lowest point, then what could possibly be waiting at the very bottom? The story of Lacey Chabert in Hallmark movies had reached its darkest chapter. After the warmth of her best films and the struggles of her mid-level ones, there finally came a point where even her strongest efforts could not save the story. This was the bottom of the journey, the movie that would always be remembered as her weakest. And for the fans who loved her, it was not easy to accept. When the film was first announced, people were hopeful. After all, it was Lacey, surely she could bring something special. But as soon as the movie aired, disappointment filled the air. The plot was empty, almost lifeless. The characters had no depth, and the love story, which was supposed to be the heart of the film, felt forced and unnatural. Every scene moved forward like a checklist, as if the movie was made simply to fill a slot on a schedule rather than to touch emotions. Lacey tried, just as she always had. She smiled, she cried, she gave her lines with sincerity. But no matter how much she gave, there was nothing for the audience to hold on to. The story offered no true emotion, no magic, no connection. Even her natural charm seemed swallowed by the flatness of the script. Viewers could feel her struggle, but they could also see the wall she could not break. For the first time, the audience did not just feel let down, they felt nothing at all. And that was the greatest tragedy. Because even a bad movie can still stir strong reactions, whether anger or frustration. But this one left many people empty. They watched, they waited, and then they moved on without remembering a single scene. The forgettable nature of the film was its biggest failure, and it marked the lowest point of her Hallmark career. For loyal fans, it was painful. They remembered the magic of her very best film, the one that had made them laugh and cry as if they were part of the story. They remembered the depth of her second great role, where she carried pain and strength so beautifully. They remembered the comfort of her mid-level films, even when they felt familiar. And then they compared all those memories to this final low point. The difference was heartbreaking. This was the moment when the journey from best to worst became clear. It was not just about ranking movies. It was about watching how even the brightest star could fall when given nothing to shine with. It showed the audience the truth of storytelling. No matter how talented the actor, without a strong script and direction, even greatness can be wasted. And yet, even in this lowest point, Lacey's resilience stood out. She did not quit. She did not let failure define her. Instead, she continued to work, to give, to keep her promise to the audience. That spirit was something no weak movie could take away. Her worst film may have tested the patience of her fans, but it also reminded them of why they loved her in the first place, because she never gave up on them. The ranking was now complete, from the very best that touched hearts, to the middle films that comforted but repeated, to the disappointing lows that revealed her limits, and finally to the absolute bottom that showed the danger of wasted potential. This full journey created a picture of Lacey Chabert's career in Hallmark, not perfect, not flawless, but deeply human. It was a story of highs and lows, of brilliance and failure, of hope and heartbreak. And perhaps that is why people stayed with her through it all. Because her story was not about being perfect. It was about being real. Audiences saw themselves in her characters, in her struggles, and even in her failures. They forgave the weak films because they remembered the strong ones. They endured the disappointments because they hoped for the next moment of magic. In the end, her career with Hallmark became more than just a list of movies. It became a journey of connection between an actress and her audience. As the curtain falls on this ranking, one truth remains clear: Lacey Chabert's best films will always live in people's hearts, her mid-level films will be remembered with warmth, and her worst film will serve as a reminder that even stars can stumble. But through every high and every low, she never lost her ability to make people care. And that, more than any ranking, is the real measure of her legacy.